I can recall you saying one of the very first times, or it just was a common thread, that hard emotions equal dependency. And so if you're having them, it means that you feel dependent on something or someone to operate in a different way for you to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a horrible way to live because you have no agency over that.
Welcome to the Masterful Man podcast. I'm your host, Sven Masterson, coach, mentor, author, and fellow traveler on the path to mastery. Every man reaches the point where he knows he can't keep living the way he has been. The question is, what comes next? Here, you'll hear from men who've made the shift, men who've gone from stuck to unstuck, unshakable, and unstoppable. If you're ready to start moving forward, you're in the right place. In today's episode, I'm joined by my friend and client Craig for a deeper exploration of a topic that sits at the heart of many men's questions. What is my mission? Why am I here? And how do I know if the purpose I'm living is actually mine? This isn't a story of crisis or rock bottom. It's a conversation between two men who've spent years walking out the difference between ego-driven striving and embodied heart-centered purpose. We talk about the ways men often inherit ideas of mission that aren't truly their own, the confusion that can come when those paradigms stop working, and what it looks like to trust a deeper knowing within yourself. If you've ever wrestled with your sense of calling, identity, or the feeling that something is missing even when life looks good, this one's for you. Let's get into it. Hey, Craig, welcome back to the Masterful Man podcast. It's nice to have you back in the studio.
It's good to be here.
Yeah. I think last time we talked about mission. No, we talked about self-worth. And I've gotten a lot of really great feedback from that episode from a lot of men, actually a lot of women. And we kind of mentioned some stuff at the end of that episode that I think piqued your curiosity and interest in having a follow-up conversation. And mine too. So I'm going to ask you to introduce today's topic. And just to let our listener know, we don't have a script. We're just going to be two men talking about this topic, and we're going to see where it goes.
Yeah, I think it's important to state there definitely is no script here. It's just, this is 100% off the cuff. But we ended the self-worth episode. And, that was not scripted either. But towards the end of that, we were talking about, if you really can't find sort of internal settlement or comfort with self-worth, it's really going to be difficult to connect with what you feel is your mission and purpose in life. And so I think you even had said, that's a whole other episode. We'll have you back for that. And then I don't think,
and look, we did it.
Yeah, here we are. But I don't know that either of you even thought like, oh, okay, it's not as though we scheduled it. From that episode, that piqued some things in me in the conversations that I am having with men, and I've been having a lot of conversations around values and how that is connected with mission and purpose. So I just want to dig into that.
I'm curious what your experience is with some of this because, you're starting to talk to a lot more men. And in my experience with men, when I first meet them, most of them cannot clearly articulate their values. They can articulate some of them. And I think it's related to this mission and purpose idea. And interestingly, like in the lifespan of a mentoring relationship, eventually, most guys come to me and to our community because of some sort of conflict in their life that's usually relationship related. Like 99% of the time, it's a relationship with a woman. It could be a relationship with a father. It could be for the really astute person, a relationship with themselves. But eventually that smoke clears. And as soon as that smoke clears, like what men want to talk about and explore is mission and purpose. So what I've kind of deduced from doing this for about 6 years now is mission and purpose seems to be the thing for men. It's like the thing that they want more than anything else. Like the other stuff is kind of like a distraction that's
Mhm.
keeping them from that story. And I've definitely developed some perspectives about this over the years. I don't want to jump right into them, but I'm curious as you're starting to talk to more men if you're finding that there's a lot of confusion that men have around their values. And then we could talk about maybe why it's difficult to pursue mission and purpose if you're starting in that place.
There is a lot of confusion around values. And I think, and this would ring true for me, is that most of the values that I had established throughout my life were these external things, which we talked a little bit about, but those aren't really values. And so I think that people have there's just a misunderstanding of what they even are. People have values, they just haven't identified them. And so this is really the in the conversations that I'm having, and even I'm having coaching conversations with women as well, and getting to these values is that people don't think about these things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yet they inherently know them. And so when I'm having conversations or, we're talking about goals or something, and it's like I spend a fair amount of time making sure that the goals that people have align with their values. And when they're pressed on that a little bit, it really, like, you can see this like sort of deep, overwhelming reflection come, and they're like,
Yeah.
I'm not, I've never even thought
Yeah.
about this. And so then it leads to this, well, gosh, I'm not sure I even really know what these are.
Yeah. This is why in the masterful journey, we don't talk about values or nuts, which are non negotiable, unalterable truths. That's a Wayne Levine reference. And it's not that I don't care about them, it's that your values, like a true value, it's a non negotiable, unalterable truth, right? And most people don't know what those are for them because they live in the mind instead of the heart or the core of their being. And so until you get somebody oriented to what exactly is self and you get them out of their head, they don't have a snowball's chance in hell of figuring out their values because the brain is like super pragmatic, the ego, right? And I'll talk more about that in a second. So I don't have any critique for coaches and mentors that do this differently. I just found early on when I tried to start with values, we would immediately get stuck because a man couldn't answer the questions. He might know some of them, but they were nebulous, right? Where, I mean, because you took the renewed masculine man, once you figure out the difference between your true self and your ego, now you can take a look at values because values, your ego can trick you. It can say, like, well, I value this, but everything the ego values is ultimately about glorifying itself. And mission is not glorification of self, it's the multiplication of self.
Yeah.
And that's a huge difference, right? So what I found early on when I was starting out with mentoring was that if you ask a man about values and boundaries, inevitably he created values that were completely outside of his own capacity to walk in. They required everybody else to cooperate, and his boundaries did likewise. And if you have boundaries and values that require things of other people, you are absolutely living in your ego, in my opinion, because it's not achievable. I can't have a value that requires something of you, just like I can't have a boundary that requires something from you, because you could tell me, well, fuck off, right?
Yeah.
And if you do, now I can't be a person who lives by their values or boundaries, right? So that's when I shifted it to being about 9 months in before we really start looking at that.
Well, it's interesting because, a lot of the coaching, just coaching, not mentoring, but coaching that I'm doing is with men and women. And so it's goals oriented. And, it's from a coaching perspective and, trying to align to have additional sessions with people, it's probably not good to immediately challenge and say, hey, does this goal really even match your values? Because then they really start to think, and then it's like this like windfall of questions. So, gosh, I don't know if, and so does even continuing on with coaching sessions around a specific goal that then they start to completely question is even the goal that they want. I think there's uh, deeper things that come up with them that maybe they don't even assign or attach to, oh, I should be getting coached on this. That becomes maybe even more of just a deeper thought process.
You're kind of accidentally highlighting the difference between transformational coaching and remedial coaching. And you're like, you're in a community that's a transformational coaching community. When we were both in Steve Horseman's environment, Steve is a transformational coach. And transformational coaching, it's not disconcerned about goals, but it's more
Yeah.
of a root cause kind of coaching. And yet most coaching programs don't teach transformational coaching. They teach remedial coaching. What's your
No, and
goal? Here's how to achieve it.
well, this is what's so interesting because and the coaching program that I did does do, but people aren't used to that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so I've had trouble in going through the course that I did, keeping it within a time frame because we've spent so much time with people on the goal itself, because we've spent so much time around how does this attach to your values? Do you really even want this as a goal? And because I've come from this community and so 3 years of transformational coaching, and I'm really not thinking I should just help you get to this goal, because that doesn't feel like authentic to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want
So
to hear
it's
more about like the context you're coaching, but let me just, for the listener's sake, let me paint this in context. Maybe here's what would be difference. Let's just say you wanted to improve your golf swing. Okay. A remedial coach is going to say, okay, well, here's the things we need to do to improve your golf swing. A transformational coach is going to say, well, what do you hope to get out of improving your golf swing? And they're going to find out that you're trying to impress women. And then that transformational coach is going to say, well, why is it you want to impress women? And they're going to keep peeling the onion of that why and find out actually your chief problem is you're an insecure person and you're using improving your golf game or something as a way to get a sense of value, worth, and significance. And that's an entirely different thing. But most people don't know they have these root issues, right? And so
yeah.
when you don't know that your root problem is insecurity, you're living life thinking, well, if I could just improve my golf swing, I'm going to have a girlfriend or I'm going to have better friends. And the world will meet you all day long in trying to improve that remedial stuff. And I'm not saying there's no place for it, but I struggle with this as a challenge too, because I don't like to talk about remedial stuff for very long. And so even kind of coming up with content that meets people who are thinking remedially, but then quickly shows them the connection to deeper things, it's very challenging. I think it sounds like you're running into this a little bit, that
I
you're,
am, and
yeah.
it's just, I think it's because my background here is that I'm not used to remedial conversations, and they're deeper. They're just inherently deeper, and we really get into how these things are touching the deeper parts of our souls. And this is sort of an anecdote, but I've had with people within my cohort, you do sort of practice coaching sessions, and I would say at least 3/4 of the people that I've done that with, so we're talking 6 sessions, so I don't know, 4 or 5 of those, through like my line of questioning around the goal and then the values, have been brought to tears. And it's really kind of interesting to be a part of that. And I'm not intentionally doing that. It's just it's not like as though I have the power to do that. It's just like a really deep level of questioning.
You can own your power there. I think the part of going through a transformational process is that you show up differently in conversations like that. You have real presence, you have real empathy and compassion, and you see more deeply. And this is a big reason why I think we need to have transformational experiences, is because when men can show up with other human beings and go deeper, where actually that's actually mission, by the way. You're multiplying that transformation outward to the rest of the world, right? That is what all missions should ultimately do. And I don't think people are prepared for that. So yeah, it's not uncommon for people to feel teary, because to me that says it's heart opening, that people are connecting like, whoa, I didn't expect that. I thought I just wanted to improve my golf swing, or I thought I just wanted to stop drinking. And now I'm finding out I don't know who I am.
Well, and I would say that for many of those people also, it's like, wow, I really was seen and heard. And by the way that this person is speaking to me, it is abundantly clear. And so that can bring up a fair amount of emotions, for people that largely have not felt that way. So yeah, I mean, I feel a bit like off, it's part of this topic certainly, but maybe it's kind of, this is segueing in a little bit to where I feel like my mission and purpose has gone or come to.
Well, let's talk a little bit about life cycle, just to put some context around this, because as people from a transformational community, we're going to see things more deeply. We're going to see cause and effect, and we're going to generally help people try to understand the layers to the question. So if somebody came in today and said, what's my mission and purpose? It's not a question you're going to answer in 24 or 72 hours. Because when a person lives up in their head, they're living in the brain. Okay, so let's just talk about this brain stuff a minute. My brain, your brain, is an organ dedicated to trying to keep us safe in our environment. And to do that, it uses our past experience to predict and interpret what's going on. And so it's in a constant state of scanning the environment, interpreting, and adjusting. So when you live that way, it's one thing if you're in the Serengeti and there's wild beasts all over the place, right? Totally appropriate to live in that space. And this is how we're made. But most people are living in existential ways. So because they feel uncertain about who they are, because they're afraid, fearful, anxious, ashamed, insecure, it's like they're up in their heads all the time, and their brain is scanning, and it's saying things like, what do I have to do to get Craig to think I'm a good person? What do I have to do to get my wife to be nice to me, right? And so your brain becomes preoccupied with managing all of these threads and these strategies. And because you're living up in your head now, that's, first of all, like as well as I do, that consumes a tremendous amount of cognitive energy, because you're always thinking about what other people are thinking about. And that's a dead giveaway, by the way, that you're in your head. If you're in your head, you're always thinking about what other people are thinking about. And you can't find mission and purpose there, because your brain is doing that chameleon thing. It's just ping ponging all over the place. Oh, I'm with Craig. Now I got to remember what Craig likes. I got to pay really close attention to what he's saying, because I don't want to, in some way, have conflict, because I won't feel safe. And you do this with your wife. You do this with maybe your employer. You do this with, and it's not that you never are disagreeable, by the way. It's that you're in a protection mode. You're in a stay safe mode. Some people would call this hypervigilance. I like to call it hypo-resilience. I'm establishing this context because this is where a lot of people feel a deep longing to have mission and purpose. They want it, but they can't get there. And so what we would say in our community, and what we help men with, is let's clear out all this other bullshit going on, where you're focused on all this outward stuff. And then once that's gone, your purpose generally is visible. You don't even have to go looking for it, because you sort of step forward into it, because it's natural. It's like a lot of other things. It's there when you stop living in your head. So that's the context I wanted to give. What comes up for you in that?
I think first it's like I just spent so much time there in my head, not being present. We talked about this a little bit last night on our call, but it is so hard to be connected with whatever your mission and purpose is if you are constantly thinking about something else. If you're in your head, how are people going to respond to this? And that is not that is mission and purpose if you're concerned about how others are going to respond to it.
Well,
I
hold
think
on
of,
one
yeah.
one second. One second. It's not that it's not mission and purpose. I would say it's just being a little bit polluted. I think this is kind of one of our challenges is that in our heart, we have very pure intentions. We actually do have clarity at all times, I would say, in our core. But then the mind gets involved and the anxiety and fear, and it starts to say, yeah, but, and it starts to draw your attention to all of these, possibilities. You start catastrophizing. You start worrying about all of these things that could go sideways. And then what started out as clarity and passion and desire quickly gets muddled with what your brain is doing. And this is why you need to know the difference between the dialogue in your head that comes from the brain and what I would call more like your core self. Some people call your spiritual self. If you don't know that there's two things, there's two voices at least within, and they both sound like you'll have an extremely hard time sorting this out. I would say impossible. Anyway, just want to add that.
Yeah, it's when I think about like how I've, painted in the past or gotten really connected with my artistic self in the good times during that, it's for me, like, and I am connected with that process. I'm very, very present. I'm not doing it because I anticipate that somebody's going to look at that and be like, painting that you did. Similarly, for athletics sports, there were times where like you're just get in that zone, that flow state. And so I'd say that kind of feels very mission purpose like. And where I was going with that before is if you can be derailed by others outside of that, that doesn't mean that it isn't your mission and purpose to your point, but it does mean that you probably need more clarity or some work around this so that you aren't easily derailed.
Right.
And
You need some encouragement.
yeah, and so that, heart brain push pull duality of things oftentimes gets in the way. And so what I have found over the course of this work is that that brain voice isn't as loud. It's just, it
Now,
was now, right? Yeah, it was screaming and took up, it was on the podium and it had the microphone.
yeah.
And, my heart or soul or spirit, whatever you wanted, whatever you want to call that, was sort of in the corner of the room whispering. And I could hear it, but it didn't take up the room. Where now I would say it's the opposite. There's this whiny little brain in the corner, like stomping its feet and screaming. But now I'm up on stage and, my centered self, and it just kind of like, yeah, I'm not paying much attention to that.
I don't remember if this is in the curriculum or not, but there's one client that always likes to bring up this. I had this image somewhere with two volume dials, heart and brain. And a lot of people try to just like get their brain, like just get rid of it or something like that's even possible. But I just see it as the process of transformation is learning to tune into the heart and turn the volume up. And then to notice how squawky and neurotic the brain can be at times, not always. I mean, we have it for a reason, but learn to modulate that volume dial based on what the heart is saying.
Yeah, and I think context matters because, if I'm out in the Serengeti, do I want to turn my brain all the way down, like, to a whisper? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where the metaphor kind of falls short. Really, the ideal is to be coherent between
Yeah,
them.
I don't think it does fall short though, because it's really like being aware enough to know what setting that you're in. And the problem is that and the brain and the ego takes over, where it's like, well, I want to be in control in every single setting. I don't ever want to be shut off. And there are times where if we're present in our everyday life and with them, we're just much more easily able to say, hey, I know that you want to keep me safe, but I'm going to turn you down right now. I'm, whatever it is, I'm painting a picture, or I'm working on this. It's game night with my family, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
it can be turned down in that.
So maybe a complementary perspective here. I started to build some curriculum around this, and then it just got deep really quick. So it's on pause. But if you think about your brain and its job, one of the things your brain does is says like, hey, that looks like where you could find water over there. It's there to help us connect with resources. Hey, it's time to get warm. Hey, it's time to build a shelter. Hey, it's time to hydrate. It's time to eat. And so when you have a need, your brain is a fascinating and really superb, part of yourself to help you acquire what you need. I would posit that at some point in life, it seems to be around age 7, not perfectly, but as you become a certain level of self-aware, you start feeling a deficit, not in material needs, but existential needs, like being liked, being emotionally safe, or being valued or treasured or worthy. And so it seems to me, and I'm no neuroscientist, but a bit of a philosopher, that your brain, it's like when your heart shuts down and says, hey, I no longer believe I can keep myself safe. I no longer believe it's enough to like myself. I no longer believe I have value, worth, and significance. It's like your brain says, okay, well, I'll do my best to figure out how to do that. And so it starts to try to align you and your behavior and strategy using the same tool that would go get water and firewood and calories to now try to go get value and worth and like and significance. And it's like your brain is trying to do a job that it really can't do. So some people kind of make the brain and the ego a little bit of a villain within. I don't think that's necessary or helpful. I tend to see it as using an organ, part of our, a capacity we have naturally in a way it's not really intended, right? I don't think your brain can answer existential. I think we try to do that, especially in a Western worldview that seats the self in the head. But it seems like that's kind of where we go sideways. So, and here's what I mean. So what we find in Masterful Men and in the coaching experience is when a man knows how to be his own sense of value and worth, his brain just quiets in that way. It stops trying to strategize to go get worth because he's quote unquote self-sourcing it, right? He knows how to source it within. And so the way I look at my own inner life is if my brain is chatty about something, if the volume is high, then I work backwards from there to say, well, I must not be actually doing a good job self-sourcing this because my brain is trying to go get it. And I find with total accuracy for me, if I start self-sourcing that thing, my brain just quiets in that area. And so I've gotten so much of my internal bandwidth back over the last 10 years or so by just having my heart take responsibility for what it had abandoned in the 40 years prior. Stuff like appreciation, love, all these things I had outsourced to other people. And if I stay there or abide, then I find, my brain's just quiet. Actually, it's spooky. And I remember, I think you've even said this to me before. Lots of men say this as they're healing their insides. They say like, I kind of feel strangely quiet. I don't know what to do with this because they're so used to having this inner chatter in their head all the time, right? That when it goes away, it's a little bit disconcerting at first.
I think, and this is going to go down the rabbit hole.
That's okay. That's where we're all about the rabbit holes here.
It's judgment shutting off, where...
Say more about that.
This is where a lot of these conversations have been going. So when we believe that our values are outside of ourselves and we don't achieve them, then there is this internal judgment over external things.
That's a drama triangle, by the way.
Yeah. So when this starts to shift, and where I have been trying to coach is, hey, there may be some external things that need to be looked at or viewed, or if you're trying to do something, but why approach it from an all or nothing judgment where discernment needs to become part of what we are using in our everyday life and vocabulary, where it's not I didn't get that and therefore I'm a failure, but hey, what happened here? I wanted this to be achieved or whatever it may be, and I got this right or that wrong, and I'm able to discern many more things out of that than just yes or no or pass or fail. And so when you start doing that, it just makes these things feel a lot less impactful on self-worth when judgment is gone. And now I'm just I'm using discernment, taking judgment away from really everything in life from a values perspective. I think it just leads to some more positive things in life.
I would say just unpack judgment a little bit. When you believe you have something that you need and you believe it's outside of you, remember I mentioned the drama triangle, you're creating inside of you a drama triangle, which means you're placing yourself in a victim role and you're blaming a person or circumstance as being the cause. And you're seeing a person or circumstance as being what rescues you from that. So where judgment plays in is you will generally judge the person or circumstance you believe that's causing the problem. That's the persecutor. So you're judging the persecutor. And there's a part of your psyche that says, if the persecutor would just become the rescuer, I could have what I want. And so then you judge that. You judge them for not actually performing the actions you believe would meet your needs. So let's use a real life example. You're a husband and you're mad that your wife won't get off her cell phone. This is a common one, right? If she just put her phone down, and what's actually going on is you're feeling unseen, unappreciated, not loved, which is an internal state. And your psyche is saying it's because she's spending all her time on the phone. And if she would, so that's the persecutor. See, the victim is like, I'm not loved. I'm not appreciated. I'm not respected. I'm not cared for. And she is a persecutor because she's giving her time to the phone or to the kids or to her book club or whatever. We all have tons of it. And if she would stop that, and if she would do these things, if she would sleep with me, if she would hold my hand, if she would say nice words, whatever, that's the man psychically saying if she would stop persecuting and start rescuing, then I'd have what I need. So that's the drama triangle, right? Judgment is a huge part of that because what I just described means that you put yourself in a place where you have believed that what you believe that person ought to be doing with their time is superior to what they believe they should be doing with that time, right? And so you can't have values in the middle of that, and you can't have mission and purpose. But the reason you can't have values in that is because at that moment, your values are going to be egocentric. I believe people should give me their time. I believe a woman, but that's not your value. That's you believing that other people's values should align to your will, which in other places we would call narcissism, right? So is this helping?
No, it is. I think what's coming up for me is that we get into a drama triangle so our heart, brain, and then whatever our value set is, our true internal value set, we get into like a drama triangle with those things where
I'm curious about this because I would say your heart can't be part of a drama triangle, meaning because your heart can't be victimized. Like there's nothing your heart needs outside of itself. But so tell me more about what you mean. I'm not trying to disagree.
I know, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. Where would I think it could be a persecutor if the brain views itself as a victim? Like, oh, hey, the heart wants this. And, the heart sees being compassionate or being empathetic towards people. But me, the brain is feeling as though I can't be that because it doesn't allow me to operate in this other way. So then the heart, from the brain's perspective, becomes the persecutor because it wants you to live your life in this other way.
Well, it tries to.
It tries to, right? And so what the heart in that situation would constantly be doing is just saying, I'm not taking part in this. But the brain is just saying, no, I can't live this way. I can't live this way. I can't live this way. Like, this is really...
Is it fair to say that's why the brain looks outward?
Yes. And that's why these internal values then they get shifted to something external of what can be controlled. So
here's something. This might sound totally bombastic. I would say your emotions, your hard emotions, are the body's way of telling you you're doing that. I mean, that's a really reliable pattern. We see it with men all the time. Like when you start looking outside of yourself for something that ought to be sourced within or could be, you'll have signals of pain, emotional pain. And I would say that's... Go ahead.
I can recall you saying one of the very first times, or it just was a common thread, that hard emotions equal dependency. And so if you're having them, it means that you feel dependent on something or someone to operate in a different way for you to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a horrible way to live because you have no agency over that.
That's right.
And so until you... But for the person that comes in initially hearing that does feel a bit bombastic, or like, well, who are you? Because we don't live that way. We don't live that way at all, where we can say, I actually do get to be myself. I do get to be authentic. I do get to live how I want to live and what feels comfortable and good to me. But when we're just so concerned about how that will impact other people, it makes choosing that extraordinarily difficult. And even coming to that realization that my insides might actually be tied to other people, that's a really hard chain to break.
Yeah. Well, some people get really angry about this. This is why we're probably not a super popular community, because the level of personal ownership is way above most people's comfort zones. And they don't like to hear it. The ego-based way of being, to get the news that the answers aren't outside of you, it's met with venom and disdain.
Yeah, but that's the only transformational path. I mean,
unless you can get the whole world to bow to your will. Yes. How many people do you need to adapt to your expectations for you to be happy?
Well, and the problem with that is that now you're standing on a rug that can be pulled out from under you at any time.
Yes, right.
Where once you reach that transformational path, or you start walking that transformational path where you say, oh, hey, I actually do have agency and control over my feelings. Yes, I can be impacted by the things that other people do. They can cause emotion in me to be felt.
Right.
But it is my responsibility to filter that, to work through it. It is not to point a finger and say, you must change. Or if it is such, a drastic thing where you then go to your boundaries and you say, I'm not going to live like this. But that is taking ownership of those circumstances. And I don't think people really have an understanding of that. So, yeah.
Not in relationships.
It's quite a shift to get to that point where, you're no longer standing on a rug that can be pulled out from under you. You're grounded.
Yeah.
What could shift for you? An earthquake, and maybe that's, metaphors always die, but something really, really, really challenging could shake you.
Well, I would say a new area that you're not grounded. I don't think of groundedness as binary. I think the human journey is that you're learning to be more and more grounded. You're learning more and more what self is and to accept that, and that your emotions are constantly telling you areas that you feel powerless. That's even though I said hard emotions equals dependency, if I distill that down as small as it could go, I would say hard emotions equal powerlessness. And anywhere you feel powerless, you create dependency, right? If I don't feel powerful to supply something, I'm going to look outside of myself. I'm going to establish a cognitive contract with something outside of me. And then I'm going to try to manipulate it, try to control it, try to cajole and appease, because I'm dependent upon that thing. And that's going to be what I judge. I'm going to have a lot of hard emotions about that. So if you just understand that hard emotions spring up in us when we feel powerless, and they're not there to lead us, but to inform us. Then I could say, oh, I'm having a hard emotion, which, men, we all learn to suppress, avoid, ignore. Like we learn to put this whole system of the body aside, like it doesn't matter. And then we don't get to see our dependency. We don't get to see and troubleshoot this part of our experience, where if we would actually honor the experience and say, wow, I'm feeling a really hard emotion right now. What can I learn about myself here? Why is this? It's kind of like if you we've probably overused this on this show, but if you disconnected all of the gauges and lights on your car's dash, you're at a disadvantage. You're not going to know until something catastrophic happens that it was happening, because you ignored the signals that your car uses to let you know, hey, you're out of oil or your temperature's off the charts. And this is what men do with emotions. And so our first step is getting a man back in touch with this emotional system and understanding how it works, and that it's information that you can use to say, this is an area I've been powerless.
Yeah,
and then go from there.
What comes up for me with that is that, so men have tried to avoid emotions. So they're trying to avoid the check engine light, so to speak, but we're not all mechanics. And so if you think about the community or tribe of guys, where if you're not connected with other men or people that can help you with that, or even, a good therapist, then you're going to be like, well, what good is listening to my check engine light if I don't know how to fix whatever problem it is? Mm-hmm. So I actually just want to ignore it. And I'm going to find other ways that I can cover it up, because I don't know how to deal with it. And so what this really transformational piece of being able to just, plug in the diagnostic scanner and see, all right, what are all the codes that are coming up? And then I'm going to take all of those, I'm going to go back to my people or my person or whoever it is that can help you, and then start saying, here's what I got. I need help working through this. And now you're actually able to. And it's easier for men to open up when they know that they can actually address these things. Because I think in the past, what I would say is if I had listened to all those, I had no clue how to address any of them. And so it was scary. It was a fearful thing. Yet I'm supposed to just be stoic, and I'm supposed to deal with it, and I'm not supposed to show my emotion or that it's bothered me in any way. And so we use whatever sort of external things to wash it away. So that would be a little bit of a plug to say, connect with the community, because then you can actually, plug in the old OBD2 scanner and see what's going on and get that report over to the men and hey, let's dig into this.
I just shared this with a guy yesterday, the OBD2, which is funny that we both use that metaphor in the last 24 hours. One thing I hear all the time that men appreciate about the way we do things in our community is that we show them what to do with their emotions. And this isn't critique for other modalities, but here's what a man's experience is often like. Hey, I have all these warning lamps turned off in my vehicle. And they go somewhere and somebody says, oh no, let's hook that back up. And then the engine light comes on and they're told, okay, let's make it brighter. And so they're like, okay. And so they're just told to emote more, emote louder, emote more honestly. Hey, all good stuff. But then most men tell us this, okay, now what? And that's where the conversation oftentimes stops. It's just they don't feel better for having emoted, which is why they didn't do it in the first place, right? Because it seems irrelevant to get caught up in emotions if they're not there for something. And so what we help men to do is to, bring it back online. Don't judge them or yourself for having them. I would suggest there's no bad emotion. There's no emotion that's wrong. They're just there telling you something. And then to do something with it. So kind of what we provide for men, which men seem to really like, is, you might be too young for this, but in my day and age, we had something called Chilton's manuals. So before the internet, if you wanted to fix a car or a motorcycle, you had to go get this 2 or 3 inch binder from the library that told you the wiring diagram. And so we have kind of created the Chilton's manual, or the wiring diagram, for a man to say, oh, okay, you're feeling this. Here's the debug chart that points at dependency and the inner stories of powerlessness. We patch that up in a man and he starts to have more freedom there. And as he does, that emotional pattern stops. And not that it was bad, but like anything else, if you fix your engine, the engine light goes off. And so let's bring this back to mission and purpose in a minute. If you've ignored your dashboard, or you stop ignoring your dashboard, but it's full of error and warning lights, you're not going to be able to focus on a big kind of existential issue like mission and purpose, because you're too preoccupied trying to figure out all of the dings and flashing lights in your system. You see what I'm saying? And so this is why I don't bother trying to get into mission, purpose, value systems before we get that settled, because if you can't help a man understand the dashboard, he doesn't have any chance of figuring out that other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think just I was going to say, yeah, let's tie this back to just strictly, what's a mission? If you just said, okay, staying on this metaphor, my mission is to drive cross country, whatever it is. And, you get in your car and all of these lights are on and you just say, well, I'm just going to put some tape over it. Like, what are the chances you're actually going to make it? Pretty low. But if you have the knowledge and the tools to address all of these things, now you are able to go out onto that mission, with that repaired. And then as lights come up, know what to do and how to handle those or who to go to. So it almost does seem people want mission and purpose, but you got to do the work before and you can't jump to it
100%.
because you don't know how to, you just don't know how to get there. And so I would argue that we just didn't know. There were these other ideas of what we wanted, but there were all these warning lights maybe coming up that we were just putting tape over.
Right.
And yeah, we have absolutely learned how to do that and what lights to listen to and what warnings and flashes and sounds are.
I would suggest you could teach every man to be his own mechanic too. So I know we don't all start there, but one value we hold in the Masterful community is that we do teach men how to do this, not just with themselves, but one another, because it's not a good plan if you have to go to some sort of professional resource long term. Let's get back to your metaphor. If I wanted to drive across the country, that was my mission. And every time I got in my truck, it was throwing all these codes. I'm not going to get very far. But I'm also not going to get very far if I have to have a whole cadre of professionals follow me around in order to diagnose my truck, right? So I was having this conversation with one of our members yesterday about this, and I used this exact metaphor. And I was saying, last summer, for example, I'm a diesel guy, and I have a 6-liter Power Stroke. And my EGR valve went bad. And I was like, it felt kind of like I should try to fix this. I'm a pretty handy guy. I have a code reader and I saw what it was. So I ordered an EGR valve. I put a new one in. I did a bunch of stuff. I did a spring kit on my truck and whatnot. And the engine light went off. And what I was sharing with him is, I had a little bit of anxiety for a little while, for like a couple weeks. Like I didn't want to go too far in that truck because I was like, did the work I did work? And so I looked for the engine light for a few weeks. And then eventually I had confidence that, okay, it worked. And next time I get an EGR code on that truck, I'll feel like I'm empowered to know what to do. I don't have to go to the mechanic for that. I still need to go to the mechanic for some things, but there's a few things now I don't, because I learned to have confidence in my own ability to troubleshoot those codes. And this is how, when you gain confidence, or what I would call emotional confidence, you feel like, I can head now across country because I understand how to keep the system running, and I'm not giving all of this attention that has been preoccupying me to be sidetracked. Can I say something this might be kind of controversial? We have an application form for people getting mentoring, and I always ask, do you have any diagnoses with these things? Just to know, the vast majority of men report some form of ADD, ADHD, either professionally diagnosed or self-diagnosed. And I kind of wonder, is this just men experiencing like the cognitive fusion of and confusion of all this stuff, right? Because if you think about it, if you're anxious and you don't know how to relate to yourself, your inner dialogue is going to be like a ping pong game. It's just going to feel like you're constantly just like all over the place, right? Which is kind of similar to how people describe ADD and ADHD. But again, I'm not a medical or mental health
Right.
professional.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that I would, based on my pretty limited knowledge of those conditions, would say that I would be able to self-diagnose myself in that way.
Today?
There's still things that come up, right? Like I become overwhelmed. I have anxiety about things, but I am able to recognize when I'm feeling. So for instance, we're doing this 77 strong, which is I would say a better rendition of 75 hard. And so I went to bed early. I felt like I've been kind of grumpy this week. I need more sleep. I know that I need more sleep. I can see it on my charts. I can see that, like, how I'm feeling. And so I went to bed early. I got up and I still I just didn't feel good, but it was like my time to work out. I was supposed to work out, and I was supposed to sit down and do my reading. I was supposed to sit down and do my journaling. I was supposed to go do I was supposed to do all of these things, but I was like, I don't feel like I don't feel it. I feel anxious. I feel not good. And I said, you know what? I'm going to listen to that, and I'm just going to go back to bed. And I went back to bed. It's the sort of the check engine lights. I had 3 check engine lights that were, you're going to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. And I was just like, I'm going to go back to bed. I didn't even I didn't pour the coffee. I left it on. I laid down on the couch and I got another like really good 60 to 70 minutes of sleep. And I woke up and I just felt like, oh my God, I'm so thankful that I did that. I just feel if I had tried to go through the rest of the day, powering through, putting the tape over those lights and just saying, well, my mission today is this 77 strong, it would have been a failure. So, I don't know how much that connects to ADD or ADHD or any of that stuff. But if we become consumed with what we're supposed to do or all these other anxieties in life, and we're listening, only to the judgment of what we should be doing.
I think it has everything to do with it, because here's the classic pattern is it gets back to that idea I said earlier, that mission is the multiplication of self, which you have to have a healthy self if you're going to multiply it, where the ego is interested in glorification of self. So your heart says, hey, bro, go back to bed. Sometimes it's the most vital thing you can do. The most awesome thing you could do is go get more sleep. But then your ego says, we can't do that. What will people think? Right? And so now you have to tune into the shadows of king, warrior, magician, lover. In this particular case, something men are told to do all the time. Hey, you need to bring online the masochist, which is a shadow of the warrior, who like falls on his sword and he's deeply sacrificial and he actually ignores his body.
Side note, I was really good at that.
Yeah, most men actually only know they're masochist. Some men know they're sadist because they don't know that what a healthy warrior is, right? Like they don't know the healthy self because they're living in the ego, which our philosophy is that the shadows are in the ego and that the core 4 archetypes would be heart-based. And so, but that's what most men will do. They'll go out and just they'll white knuckle it all day. They'll deprive themselves and they'll think meanwhile they're being strong, but they're doing that to glorify the ego, which means they're doing it so that other people will think certain things about them or that they'll feel better about their own insecurities. But that's a fast track to the grave, first of all. And you're not going to be missional and purposeful because you're not actually thinking about mission. You're thinking about self-preservation. in that moment, and not in a good kind, not about like, how do I keep my body alive, but how do I keep the world thinking certain things about me?
Mm.
I think that's tremendously unhealthy. And in the world of men, a lot of people promote this as somehow masculine, that it's some sort of good behavior or good. And I'm not talking about doing hard things. I love to do hard challenge,
Same. Yeah.
but there's a healthy way to do it that's not rooted in ego, but that's rooted in expansion. Hey, I want to have a higher capacity for discomfort. I want to have a higher capacity for suffering so that I can endure the hard moments on the path to mission and purpose. But then the ego does this a totally different way. I want to do hard things so that other people see me do hard things and think I'm all that in a bag of chips. And that's a totally different motivation, right?
Well, it's like tuning into self-compassion, and staying on the same one. If your radiator starts overheating, you just ignore it, but you'd be like, hey, I need to stop. I need to cool down. I need to get more coolant. I need to, and I think of like, all right, so if mission and purpose is in the span of our lifetime, it's perpetual. There's not like one mission, or maybe purpose is perpetual and mission can change. It's malleable, and it can adapt and it can change. And I think so. If you're looking at these warning lights, so to speak, sometimes I think it's, you know what, this vehicle is not serving me and I need to move on to a different one. It like it can't be fixed. If it's not us, but it's the mission. This mission, is FUBAR. It's time to go. It's time
I
to
love
do
that word.
It's time to do something different. But when we just ignore, which is what men generally do, you're not able to really self-assess that. I mean, that is a tremendous skill, which, listening back to our prior couple, I say tremendous a lot, but it
Accept
really is.
yourself.
Yeah, I'll try to stop, but
I found out how much I say like when I edit these. I'm like, man, I say like a lot. I got to cut that out.
So there is simply a lot of value in being able to slow down, being able to assess our emotions, being comfortable going to people that you trust and saying, hey, I don't know how to deal with this right now. Can you help me? But learning, can you teach me how to do this on my own so that I don't need to come to you every single time I have something? Sometimes, something's beyond your control. You need to make an appointment and bring the car into the shop. And I would say those are, for me, I use those in like the one-on-one calls that we'll have. So I'll just say, hey, I'm not figuring this out right now. I need some extra assistance. But again,
I do the same.
Tying this all back to mission and purpose and values is, no, you can't necessarily jump there, but I think that it's good for men to have an understanding that you can get there, and there are steps in order to do that. So for the guy that's saying, I want to get tuned into whatever my mission and purpose is, well, you can do that, but you're going to have a really, really difficult time if you keep ignoring the check engine lights.
Well, what we just basically gave people was a little bit of a mini masterclass on the prerequisites of getting to purpose, because I love your drive across the country metaphor for this, because it's perfect. You have to have some preparation in order to make that work, or you're going to be stopping at every exit trying to figure out why your car's overheating. So that's first. And that's why we don't talk about values, mission, and purpose and things like that until after we get kind of people reoriented to the basics. And because most men alive today, especially in Western culture, they've had absolutely no guidance on that part of themselves. And the only place they can remotely start to get it is in an environment that for many men feels like taboo. Like if you tell men you need mental health, and again, I have zero qualms with therapy and counseling. They're very helpful modalities. But I don't know that the culture can often appreciate that for a man my age, like telling a man to understand the basics of his life, you have to go get mental health help, carries a certain amount of just implicit shame and taboo in the process, because it's like, well, I'm exceptional. I need like professional help. And that's just weird. That's like weird territory. And I would suggest that we have that set up today because we have lost the tribal kind of way that men are. When in the past, men just took care of each other, men invited each other into masculinity. They showed them the ropes. They showed them there was some sort of gauntlet to run where you got ushered out of childhood and adolescence into manhood by other men, and they conveyed the stories, the principles, the teaching. Like you got a body of understanding of what it means to be a man. That we don't have that anymore. So now you have like tremendously confused people who are saying like the only way I can figure myself out is to go to a therapist or a counselor. And I believe there's a vital, again, that could be really useful, but it cannot replace being, initiated into manhood by other men. And so this gets really hard to figure out. So let's get back to this values, mission, purpose. I love that you made a distinction between mission and purpose, and how you said that, purpose is the going across the country, and your mission is, what do I have to do today to drive on that route? That your mission is temporary, and sometimes you have to know when it's foobarred, and you have to do a new one. Right? What comes up for you in that concept? If purpose is kind of the big picture, and we've talked about, okay, you have to be mission ready, and you have to be able to declare a mission foobarred. What do you feel like is the next part of the understanding of mission and purpose after that?
Jeez, these are deep things. So I don't think people commonly will separate those two things. Like I feel like what I've come to feel is my purpose in life is to flourish myself in order to help others do the same. That is it's so easy to see when people aren't. And that feels like a good purpose for my life. That can be done in many, 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 many different ways.
Yeah, I love it.
Missions, right? Like, so I don't know that, and we could have many different purposes. I know that is one of my purposes in life. One of my other purposes in life is to be a good father and to help my children, ultimately, like to help them flourish in life on their own, to also help other people flourish. I mean, it's just like a constant, like if that's what all of our purpose in life was, to try to help each other flourish, it would be a lot better society, and we'd have many different ways about doing that, and missions to do so.
Yeah, let me comment on that a little bit. If you listen to people who've thought a lot about mission and purpose expound on it, they generally will all say that if you distill purpose down in people, it all always seems to be some form of love. It's some form of service to the rest of humanity. If it actually has purchase, meaning like if the kind of purpose that resonates with people always has that element. And so, you mentioned like fatherhood, for example. I would say there's still one mission, that's just a certain way that your purpose is manifesting in your life. So I might think about that one of my missions is fatherhood, but my purpose, like yours, is to serve other humans. It's to contribute towards the betterment of humanity by putting love into the world, right? Understanding that, hey, I'm a vehicle, like you're a vehicle of that love or the energy or the fundamental nature of the universe, however you want to see it, God, it can flow if I cooperate with that. And sometimes it flows out in fatherhood. Sometimes it's in who I am as a neighbor. Sometimes it's in coaching or mentoring. Could be in authoring. It could be in mowing my lawn, right? So I like to think about it that purpose is kind of like my compass bearing, where I'm headed across the country. And mission is, what am I doing before sundown? That to me has been a lot more digestible than trying to live in these, like the ways I used to do this, Craig, was when I was up in my head all the time. Mission and purpose was always future oriented. I had no presence about it. It was, and it kind of disturbed me because I felt like I was constantly irritated with today because I thought that life was up ahead. Right. That's also a hallmark of living in your head, is that you're thinking about the future instead of right now. And so I didn't know how to think about mission and purpose in any other way than also like in the ego, in the brain. And it always felt like I got to get through today so I get to mission and purpose. And I missed, that's not how it works. That true purpose is something that you have to be able to do today. Like what you do today can and needs to be aligned to that greater purpose. And if you understand that, then really you can reframe today as, well, this is today's mission. It might be that today's mission is to take care of my kid who's got a stomach virus, because that does serve the big picture, the big purpose of flourishing, right? It could be schooling the kids. For you, it might be serving people with the absolute best financial products or insurance products for how their life is unfolding, right? Um, so I like to say to men who are asking this question, or remind them, you have to be able to work at this before bedtime today. If you're telling yourself another story than that, you're living in your head and you'll never experience a feeling of purpose, because you're buying the lie that life is happening later. And it's happening right now.
Yeah, I think that again, what comes up for me there is hearing that is, what am I going to do today that works? And so I know that's not what you're saying, but sometimes, working on whatever that mission might be is like, how is my best way to be today?
I think of be as purpose and mission as do. I think so. I would say that.
But are there days where we need to not do, and does that's the kind of like pausing on the side of the interstate to fill the car up with coolant because it's overheating, And so,
Yeah.
I guess it's just knowing yourself enough that I don't, I could take breaks. I don't need to be like pressing on this mission every single day, like burning
Mm-hmm.
myself out. Yeah. And ultimately, like that doesn't serve my greater purpose because I'm going to burn out. And I can't think about like a company's mission like that. The mission, yeah, you make a mission statement, but there's many ways within that to accomplish whatever that mission is. And I'm a little bit of I'm a Star Trek geek for the next generation, because growing up, we had like TV antenna and didn't get very many channels, but we got Fox, and the next generation played like reruns, and while it was new episodes would come on. So I've seen every single one of those episodes, probably multiple, and know way more about Star Trek The Next Generation than I should. So I just like sitting here talking, thinking like, what was their mission and purpose? And I couldn't remember it exactly, but so exploring strange new worlds, seek out new life, new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before. That was their overall mission. But obviously you've got like, a 60-minute episode, and I don't even know how many they had, but they were accomplishing that mission, doing many, many different things. But it's interesting because, what was the purpose? And maybe it really doesn't even matter. But I think the point it is not so binary. And perhaps this is why men get stuck, is because they think like, I need to be able to say, this is what my purpose is. This is what my mission is. It's these two things, and I can never vary or go away from those things. And then if I'm feeling anything about it, well, that becomes a problem.
Yeah, there's lots of reasons people are stuck. We talked about the emotional system not really working right. I think another reason people are stuck in mission and purpose is that if you don't know your value, worth, and significance as a human, if it's not a starting place, which is to say, if you don't know how to be, then you're not really going to have a life-giving mission and purpose, because you're chasing your own sense of self instead of starting with a sense of self, right? So to put this in another language, we talk about the difference between living in a do have be mindset, which says if I do enough, I'll have enough, and when I have enough, I could finally be enough. And that's the realm of the ego. The ego lives in do have be, but the heart lives in be do have. When I know my being, when I start there, when I start with value, worth, and significance, then the natural thing to do as a person who's already secure, who already has value, already has worth, already has significance, already has love, acceptance, etc., then you naturally do. It's like your personhood is your battery for purpose, and then you have what you need. And so that you have to have that shift, right? So most men that we meet, because they live in the head, they live in do have be, they're trying to find mission in that. And then your mission basically is a wild goose chase for trying to find your self-worth, which has never been lost. But when you look at it for it outside of you, you're going to run in circles. You're never going to feel like you're achieving something that feels deeply engaging to yourself, because you're walking around or running around with this sense of endless deficit. It's constant striving. It's constant feeling of not enough, unworthiness, everything. So you have to have that shift. You have to have that shift from do have be to be do have to really understand and engage with mission and purpose deeply, because you have to have that starting point.
How do you get
Once you
there?
have that, well, you
Well,
go
right. I
through.
mean, this is
Yeah.
the big thing, because and for the listener, you could go back and listen to the self-worth episode, because that's the starting point where you know you're enough, and you have to work on that part of it, because you really, and this is what the end of that episode was, well, I can't do mission and purpose if I don't have the self-worth part. But how do you get the self-worth part? That part took me 2.5 years to get there. um it wasn't the cognitive piece. Like, I had to just know inside. And I shared with you that I recently I grew up in a Christian home, had a lot of these ideas within me. We had Bibles around. I think my mother gave me a Bible. I don't know what version it was. I don't have it anymore. So I went out and I bought myself one, because I just wanted to understand. I think everyone should. I mean, it's arguably the most important book that's ever, just from a book standpoint, and the lessons within it. So partly I just wanted to be able to do that, to read the whole thing through at least one time. But there are so many lessons just within it. Forget about religion or anything. There's just great lessons there. So bringing something up, because I just read this, you just saying this. I don't know what chapter it is. You might probably do, but it's somewhere in John, and he's talking about, why do you worry about having enough? Do the birds worry about it? So do they worry about being able to eat the worm, or something along those
Yeah.
lines? It's like
The ravens.
they're provided for. And so will you be if you believe. And as I would say, if you believe in yourself, and if you just have self-worth and self-compassion, and you're not tied to all these other, constantly worried about all these other things, you will be provided for. And most likely because it's that be, do, have, or be, have, do, whichever.
Yeah. One way I like to talk about this is you can't look around in nature and find another living thing that has existential crisis. You don't see squirrels getting together and having therapy, or groups trying to figure out their squirrelness. Everything
Yeah.
in nature kind of has what looks like an implicit level of self-acceptance, right? They're not wringing their hands with anxiety. They're out there like, okay, the squirrels are going to find nuts today. They're going to look around. They're going to do the squirrel thing. None of them are acting badly. We're the ones to put that meaning on that. And here too, like living on a homestead really started to help me recalibrate this. that there's no animals out there apologizing for their nature. There's no animals out there that are asking other animals, "Are we okay? Are you okay?" Like they just so even if you took a God-based perspective out of it and if you believe like, hey, we're all just nature. Yeah. Why do you believe that as a living thing, you're some sort of exception to living things, that your environment is going to fail you? Right. Like we have uniqueness in this way. And
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense to say we have that uniqueness because we're so intelligent. Well, really, wouldn't you rather be like the animals and not have these crises of self-worth? That doesn't make any sense. So anyway, yeah, that verse talks about the ravens and the lilies of the field. It says, even Solomon wasn't adorned with such splendor as the lilies.
Yeah.
And I love that concept there because it can draw our attention to, yeah, why do we fret? Why are we stuck in the belief that we're not enough and we have to achieve, 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 achieve?
I'd say it's a devolution or devolution
Yeah.
in letting our brain take the wheel, because human beings on the whole, they have gotten away from nature and an ability to self-source. I don't know what percentage of the world, like if you just put them on their own and stop supply chains and everything, would truly be able to take care of themselves. It would be not a lot.
Yeah.
And yet, how would it, to your point, how would the most intelligent species on the planet not be able to actually live on their own?
Yeah. And
That
and none of
seems
them
like,
are none of them are greedy either, right? So like there's just all this stuff you don't see. I mean, I'm not a mega political person, and I don't mean this to sound political, but like we're the only creature that is destroying the environment it lives in. We're the only creature that will rape and pillage a resource in the process of this stuff, right? So like, yeah, are we evolved? I don't know if that's fair to say.
I don't think so. I would say that that is due to the do be have
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
um,
I don't have enough. I gotta go
way
get
of,
more. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, which they say is like, okay, well, that's an evolutionary thing because, way back in we were gathering berries and you came across a berry bush and there were no saber-toothed tigers around. You took as many berries as you could. And it's I don't know. It's interesting. I'm
I
no
don't buy it.
anthropologist. I can't
Yeah.
I can't figure that part out, but it's
Yeah. So that's getting back to the mission and purpose idea. There's some reorientation I believe men have to have, men and women. You have to get back to a place of self-acceptance. You have to understand your emotional dashboard and know how to keep the systems running so that you can get in the car and you can head in that direction today, the direction of purpose, the direction that feels fulfilling. I would say, just to summarize, that for people pretty much universally report they feel the most fulfilled when they're doing something that is some expression of serving other humans. I heard a TED talk one time. I have notes about this, where this guy gave a really great formula. It's been really useful for me since then. That says there's 5 questions you can ask, right? Who am I? Not someday, but who am I right now? What do I do? Right? What are what roles or actions define my day? So I'm a father, I'm a mentor, I'm a coach, I'm an author, I'm a neighbor, I'm a man, I'm a citizen, right? I'm all these things. I'm a friend, I'm a son, I'm a husband. Um, who do I do it for? What do those people want or need? And how do they benefit from what I do? And if you can just kind of walk that through in yourself, again, time boxing it to before bed or maybe before the end of the week. Because I don't know if I'll be alive tomorrow, either do you, right? So that's why I don't believe in putting all your hope in the future. I got to be able to live in this today. That if I make that my mission today is to be maximally my best human being, not my best human doing. Like, what does it look like to fully express myself as best as I understand that today before bedtime in all those roles? I'm going to live a great life. And interestingly, I'm going to do really great things that are going to accumulate kind of like time and compound interest over time. And it's going to be the best I can give to humanity. And what's really beautiful about that is I don't have to focus about like 10 years from now. I mean, I like the 5 and 10-year plan stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's just an idea. If I can't actually express something meaningful before bed tonight, well, what's the point of a 5 and 10-year plan? Right. So this is how I've kind of really reoriented and gotten present. Like tomorrow, I'll give you an example because, my family and my person, I practice a day of rest. And it's not a day of sitting there like a lump. It's a day of letting go of a mission. I don't let go of my purpose. I let go of mission. Meaning I don't do anything that feels like I have to do this, like mow the lawn or do taxes or do admin work. So my mission tomorrow is I'm going to get in a car with my 3 daughters and we're going to go have a Chick-fil-A breakfast date because we live like an hour away from the nearest Chick-fil-A and they love it. And they want to go down to this town and they want to go thrifting and all that. And I'm going to go enjoy my socks off with my daughters. And I'm going to know deep in my heart, that's totally aligned with my purpose. Because I already know how to flourish, but I want to see them flourish. I want them to feel deeply loved and cherished and delighted in. So that's the mission. Notice it's nothing grandiose. I'm not solving world hunger tomorrow.
Yeah. But is
I'm
that
just
not flourishing? I mean, that
100% it is.
it
Yeah, that's
feels
what I'm saying.
like that feels like the epitome of flourishing. Is
For
to
me, it
just
is.
yeah.
And that's going to give my wife space, who's been a mom for 28 years and, doesn't like a lot of moms. She doesn't have a lot of days where she just gets several hours where nobody needs anything from her. And so like, that's a way just to be like, hey, we're not going to be in your hair. We're going to go do a thing. I'm going to have a shift of context. We're going to go, I too am doing 77 strong. So they're going to walk with me to do tomorrow's rucking at least. And that's tomorrow's mission. And so on Sunday, I'll get up like I do in the morning and I'll have my coffee and I'll sit with my journal and ask the same question. What does it look like to do these? Like, what is maximum Sven today in all these areas, like as a husband, father, coach, etc. And I'm just going to focus on whatever I can answer that question and I can do. So like, that's my doing for the day. That's my mission. And sometimes I might have a mission for the week. I might have a mission for the month. Right. One of my missions right now, for example, is I get so passionate about men that sometimes I forget, there are other things about you. So I'm working on like re-engaging with some hobbies that I haven't let them go. I've just become consumed with this stuff. Right. So I'm working on that. Like I'm going to build, I don't know if I'll work on it this weekend, but I'm building a new patio table because I love to make things. Like you're the same way, right? And I have all this wood on the homestead. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to make a new table. I'm going to prune fruit trees. I'm going to get on my tractor and regrade my driveway.
Dig stuff because it's fun.
Don't tempt me. Yeah. It's like that's the day's mission, and it serves the greater mission of, taking care of my family, taking care of my home, taking care of my property, which is a place we like to invite people into to show them hospitality, to show them
I think
love.
this is a huge, huge part of this. And this is why at the beginning I said, I believe my purpose is to best flourish myself as well as help others flourish. Because if your primary purpose and only purpose is to help others flourish, like I think you will eventually crash and burn as well.
Well, how could you? How could you help somebody else flourish if you're not flourishing?
If you don't know how, because if that's the only way that you define your flourishing is by helping others, I don't think that's kindness.
It's actually, that's playing the rescuer in drama triangles.
Yeah.
That is finding your value and worth by being valuable to other people. And
yeah, and I think there's a lot of people that operate in that way. Where from the outside you could say, "Oh wow, look at these people and all of the things that they do for others." They, again, if the rug got pulled out from them, in the appreciation of that from others, or that they're having this impact on the world, and that topples their tower over of what their purpose is, well, then that's not, how can that really be authentic and true?
Well, plus, you know what happens in that scenario? They turn into persecutors. They turn into villains. It's a great
Yeah.
way to test if somebody's attempts to help are thwarted and even rejected, and they turn into really nasty. That's a great indication that that's what it was
Yeah,
about.
I think that could be a whole other podcast too, and that's your Narcissist or Not book with Steve Horseman. There's a part of the community narcissist or something like that, where
Yeah,
like
the communal narcissist. Yeah,
I would say that I don't think I ever got there, but I certainly was walking the edge of like, being very involved in my community, like my actual where I live, not
yeah,
masterful
yeah.
but doing a lot of things where, it's doing things for the community. But I believe that if those had been negatively received or I got, pushback, I don't know.
It was. I could actually remember specific stories where you were getting a lack of appreciation. It was really bugging you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, again, I don't really care for the labels that get thrown on people, but that meets the definition of communal narcissism. I totally had this, and now I say it without apology or shame. I didn't know better. I actually had a lot of those 8 forms of narcissism. We should probably do a whole call or two. I've thought about inviting Steve on and talking about that book and about narcissism. But
It's a great, it's great. All the content of it is so good because it's, yeah, if you take away the narcissist label, there's just so much to learn from all of those things, which we're going a little bit
yeah,
off topic now, but yeah,
that's okay.
but the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, I love talking about the shadow and explosive sides of that, because that basically, to me, I can remember telling you this in the course. Hey, like,
It maps.
these are basically things I know I don't want to be, where the things within King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, like those virtues are who I want to be. And so identifying all of those things, it just, maybe that's a place to start of, finding your values.
Yeah, we could do a whole call on values. I would say it's all the same stuff, right? If you do the work that we talked about today, if you restore your emotional life to health, if you restore your sense of self-worth to being self instead of outside of you, your values will become clear, your mission will become clear, your purpose will become clear, because you'll stop serving the neurotic, endlessly pragmatic, non-virtuous path of the ego. Your ego, at the end of the day, it just cares about what gets people thinking I'm a great guy today. And you'll be all over the narcissism map if you live like that. You'll have some ruts you fall into, right? So communal narcissism is just somebody who says, you know what? What makes people like me is when I do good things for the community. Yeah, that's a great way to get my sense of value. So it'll serve the community until it stops working. And then they'll become a malignant narcissist, maybe. Or some people, I had this trouble too. I placed great value in being right. And so I would have been probably labeled a cerebral narcissist at that time, which is a person who's just overly fixated on being right because that's what makes them feel safe in their insecurity. So yeah, you got to get all that stuff sorted out so that your mission and purpose becomes clear. And then it's actually quite easy. Like when the smoke clears, like I said, most men are like, oh, that's the direction I'm supposed to go. And oh, I feel good about it. I know what to do. I know how to get there. And then life can feel really, really gratifying. And it's cool to see that happen in a man's life. In your own life, it's cool to see it happen because that's why we're here, seemingly.
I think that it expands when you find that and you are able to live in that way. I think that it just automatically like touches other people, and it's an expansion outward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the more people, it's an exponential growth of that sort of thing, which, you know, if mission and purpose is really fundamentally about helping other people, the more people that we get that are getting rid of, you know, the self-worth that's attached to external things, they're getting back to mission and purpose, they're finding it, that's expanding, that's getting to other people, then it's you know, I know you think this, but I believe like the world can really change in a pretty powerful and good way that is apolitical. It really has nothing to do with any of that, because I believe wherever you lie on the political spectrum, the vast majority of people, they just want to see other people doing well
Yeah. Yeah.
and flourishing.
Yeah. There's a lot of themes you touched on. I want to add some commentary, and then we can wrap this up. Yeah, I'm not anti-politics. I just grew up at a time where I saw my culture try to have a be impact on culture that was outside in. It was like, if we start on the outside with politics and try to work backwards, we'll transform culture. And it didn't work, because it's starting not with people, but systems trying to basically take choices from people and corral people. I believe the fastest way to a restoration of culture and people is to restore hearts back to the simple place of knowing that you have value, worth, and significance innate within you. And just getting people to feel like they're not scumbags, right? Like addressing shame and addressing problems with our sense of inadequacy. When you do that in a person, like they experience healing and restoration of their insides, and their natural inclination then is to share that. So here's something interesting about that came up for me when you were talking, as a guy who does like organic gardening and things. Everything in nature that's alive multiplies. It's a built-in feature, right? Everything natural and healthy and fertile multiplies. Now that's, if you're struggling with fertility, don't misunderstand. That's not a commentary on your plight. I'm just saying, like, living things multiply, right? And so when you see an idea that's not multiplying, it's a great indication that it lacks that quality. It's not a living thing. It's not innately life-giving. If it were, it would multiply, right? It's the nature of organic things to multiply. So what I think I hear you saying, and I would agree, is just like, yeah, you know, like if you become alive, you're going to multiply. And I think that is a great recipe for transforming culture positively. Let's get people living. Let's get all the inorganic GMO kind of stuff out of their hearts that says, like, you're not enough, that, you know, that gets people all kind of wrapped around the axle within, and they'll multiply. And, you know, we like to do that with men. We believe that if you get men to become alive within themselves, that they will multiply that in their families. And it's not that women won't. We don't believe that women have some sort of problem with this, but we're men. And so we want to inspire men to do this. And when they do, the landscape of their marriage changes, the landscape of their family changes. And then that family is now like this, like an outpost in their community of a whole different way of living, right? A way that is concerned about the world, themselves, others, you know, they know how to flourish. I think that's a better recipe for transforming culture than the ballot box. I'm not saying I don't believe the ballot box has a role to play, but I don't know. Growing
I
up
think
in
it
the 80s.
It proves more successful. I know what the ballot box proves is undulation, just an ebb and flow, divisiveness, like,
yeah.
And that's
you
been
got to
the case.
demonize somebody.
Yeah, it's not good, but like I can look at anybody and say, I know that person wants good in the world for the most part.
Well, thank you for being a part today. I'm eager to see how people enjoy or maybe don't enjoy this conversation, but it'll be fun to put out there and see what comes up for people. So we'll have you again. We got lots of these conversations to have. Thanks for being a part, man.
Appreciate it. It's fun.
All right. We'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Masterful Man podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you and you're ready to break free from stuckness, build unshakable confidence, and lead your life with unstoppable purpose, I invite you to take the next step. Join a community of men who are committed to growth, challenge, and real transformation. Learn more at www.masterful.men, because the life you want starts with the man you choose to become.